Welcome to this 6th LAM Policy Forum, Disrupting the Region Status Quo. Today we'll have an outstanding agenda where we're going to be able to hear top policy practitioners on topics on elections, corruptions, and macroeconomics. Before we begin, I'll kindly ask everyone to silence their phone, and I also encourage you to join our discussion in the Slido. To do this, go to the link posted on the papers list in your agenda and use the hashtag LAM Policy Forum 2018 to pose questions to the panelists. On this platform, you can also vote for questions you consider should be addressed in the discussion. With this being said, I wanted to help me welcome Denise Jorgens, Director of International House, who's going to open this forum for us.
Good morning, and thank you all for joining us here at International House for this very special program. My name is Denise Jorgens. I'm the director here of International House of Chicago and the president of International Houses Worldwide, which is currently a network of 19 houses on 4 continents. Today, across the network of International Houses Worldwide, 8,400 students and scholars are in residence annually, representing more than 125 nationalities, of which over 700 students are receiving scholarships from our organization. Today's event is one of many special programs celebrating the 85th anniversary of International House of Chicago. I look forward to seeing you here at International House throughout the remainder of the academic year and during the upcoming alumni weekend as we continue celebrating turning 85. Thank you again for coming today, and thank you to all the members of our community for your ongoing commitment and dedication to our mission. And now I'd like to welcome Professor Catherine Baker, Dean and the Emmett Dedman Professor at the University of Chicago Harris School of Public Policy, to begin today's program. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to see you here to be able to open this forum, which I know we've all been eagerly anticipating for months now, and the planning that has gone into this is in evidence today with the wonderful program that's been put together. This is a crucial set of issues for the global public policy community, but also for Harris. Addressing issues of regional conflict, of urban development, of political processes is core to what our faculty are doing and what our students are doing. And the expertise represented here, the combination of practice, of experience, of leadership brought together to wrestle with some of the most complex issues that cities, countries face around the world, that's a fantastic opportunity for all of us here. And Harris is thrilled to partner with you on this. Now, I say that I'm thrilled and it's wonderful to have you all here as if I had anything to do with it. But in fact, this is a great example of a student-led movement to bring together experts to wrestle with issues that are so important, not only to the student body, but around the world on their own. And it represents the real leadership that we see in our student body. I'm new to Harris. I've been here for about 8 months. I'm still getting to know what goes on at the university, what goes on in the city, let alone what goes on in our school, which is growing and changing remarkably day to day. And one of the things that I've been so impressed by is the great ideas and the great execution by our student organizations. And LAM is a prime example of that. There are only so many things that our staff and faculty can do, and our ideas are a small subset of the ideas that would be a wonderful thing to bring to campus. And the student organizations are, of course, fond of wonderful ideas, but I've also been particularly impressed by the motivation and dedication to bring together events like this on top of all of the coursework and all the other things going on campus. And those energies and dedication are a hallmark of what our students are bringing to the world in terms of combining the coursework and the rigorous toolkit that they're getting at Harris with involvement from day one in the problems of the world and engaging with partners, with policymakers, with stakeholders to bring change to bear as soon as possible. The Latin American community at Harris is particularly strong. Of all of our international students, almost a quarter hail from Latin America, and that network of students is crucial to the wonderful richness of experience here at Harris, but also an amazing and growing alumni network. And I have learned a lot about our alumni communities around the world, and those in Latin America are some of the most involved and most dedicated, and that's a wonderful pathway for our students who are here now to then leave Harris and enter into public policy service, work with NGOs, work in the private sector in countries around Latin America. And it's also, I hope, an opportunity for those alumni to stay engaged with Harris, to continue to mentor students here, to send more students our way and enrich that pipeline, to come back to Harris and engage in activities as they did at Alumni Harris Connect weekend last weekend. So this is a wonderful community that I feel very privileged to have joined, and this is a wonderful event that we have planned for today. I am amazed at the panel of speakers that we have, including our keynote from the former president of Bolivia that we're really honored to host here. I'm really so pleased to see so many of our students and alumni here as well. I commend you all on pulling this together and presenting the community with such a rich set of discussions over the course of the day that I know you are all going to enjoy very much. I'd like to take this chance now to introduce Evelyn Sanchez. She is an MPP 18, meaning just a few months left, but 1 month left, just a few weeks on time flies, doesn't it? Well, maybe it doesn't, you feel like you're in the middle of exams. But it's my pleasure to introduce her. Evelyn exemplifies all of the things that our students represent. She came to Harris with a BA in Political Science and International Relations from the Center for Research and Teaching in Economics. She worked in the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs before Harris, and while she's been here, she's been working with the Behavioral Insights in Parenting Lab, trying to help improve educational outcomes for struggling students and families around Chicago. So that dedication to public service before, during, and after her time at Harris is something that we should all be very proud of, as well as leading this organization. So Evelyn, please join me on stage.
Thank you, Becker, for the introduction and for giving support. We are very grateful to our sponsors, and we extend a special thanks to the International House that in its 85th anniversary opens its door to receive our greatest speakers coming from all Latin American regions. Every year, LAM team asks their members what are the most relevant issues that we should be discussed during the forum. After listening to their opinions, we found a general pattern in all the topics this year: change. A clear desire of the Latin American society to deviate from the common trend and look for new alternatives. This year is critical in the political arena. 8 Latin countries have elections. But this election season is different, as the public is demanding more than a change in president and politicians, but a change of life conditions and in the status quo. Traditional politics is disintegrating as the public voices its discontent by turning to outsiders, hoping that the new politics will provide answers to socioeconomic questions that mainstream politicians have failed in. In seeking these solutions, policymakers face an aversion to modern economy, where risky innovations such as electronic currencies offer a wider freedom and access to financial markets. What is unknown is how to balance this innovation with the volatility of markets. In this way of change, also, corruption is finally being understood as a disease that we can no longer ignore. Just in the past few months, we witnessed the arrest and persecution of a generation of leaders. Our society is becoming more critical and proactive, moving forward from a state of apathy to a state of reform. Regardless of the upcoming challenge, we should be optimistic. Latin America has been granted with the solutions, leaders and their passion for making things better than the ordinary. This passion is reflected in the mission and history of Latin American matters. LAM was created in 2004 for a group of students eager to share their culture and with the desire of exploring solutions for different countries. The LAM Forum fulfills this ideal, creating a space of express concerns about region, and a space in which can we be heard, and also in which we can be questioned by peers inside of the Latin community and also outside of the Latin community. The dialogue we create here enrich our understanding of each other and help us to bridge the gaps between us. Dialogue is our strength. When I started my master at UChicago, I discovered that in US, kids learn that America is formed by two continents, North America and South America. I was surprised because growing up in Mexico, I was taught that there was only one American continent. I started looking into the general definition of a continent, what split us together or bring us together, and I didn't find a clear answer. Now, after 2 years being part of the Latin organization in the University of Chicago, I choose to stick with the definition of America as one continent. Not because I believe our countries are homogeneous, no. It's because the definition of one America invites us to be together, Latins and no-Latins, and push us to discover each other, to examine ourselves and work together to solve common problems. This definition makes us stronger. On behalf of the all LAM team, I invite all the attendees and speakers to join LAM in this effort of finding the right path to drive our passion and lead the change needed to create a better reality for our people. Welcome to the 2019 LAM Policy Forum.
Thank you, Evelyn, for your words. To begin this forum, our first panel will be 2018, Elections in Latin America, a comprehensive perspective. I'll please ask the panelists to join me on the stage. In this panel, we're honored with the presence of Fidel Cano, Director of National Newspaper Espectador from Colombia, Armando Ríos, Independent Senator of Mexico, Maria Trigo, Director of Effective College Management of the Organization of American States. Moderating the panel, we have Janeth Harris Alum 2012, and Project Manager in Mejor, Ciudad, AC. The first intervention of this panel will be by Maria Trigo. The second panelist to present will be Mr. Ríos, and the third one will be Mr. Cano. Afterwards, Janeth will lead the discussion. Now, let's welcome Ms. Trigo to share her insights on the topic.
Good morning. First of all, thank you very much, Latin American Matters, for inviting me to this policy forum. I feel very honored and happy to be here, and I congratulate them to organize this kind of event that highlights what's happening in Latin America and allows us to make some parallels, comparisons to also what's happening here in the US. First of all, I'm going to address some context and key elements to consider during this electoral cycle in the region. I'm going to talk about general trends in the electoral, and finally about open government impact on governance, which is really the issue that I promote in the OS. Between 2017 and 2019, we will have 14 presidential elections in Latin America. Only in 2018, we have elections in Costa Rica, Paraguay, Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico, and Brazil. It's an unusual year with many elections and possible uncertain results, and results that will have a very important regional impact. First of all, we are in an era post-Odebrecht corruption scandal, which involved many authorities in the region. and also which showed us two things. First of all, that corruption is had a regional impact, and second of all, that corruption is on the left and on the right of the political spectrum. It's not as in the past where it has been only associated with neoliberalism governments, but we have seen lately that some of the governments, such as government authorities such as Lula has been in problems, ministers of Cristina Kirchner in Argentina, or the vice president of Ecuador, as well as the former president Otto Pérez Molina in Guatemala or Martinelli in Panama. Also, today we have citizens that are more and better informed. With the use of technology, they have more access to public information. They know what's going on in the region, in the country, in the world, and therefore they have higher demands and higher expectations from their governments. They use technology as an ally for more transparency and for better public service delivery. Also, now they help their candidates accountable to their promises. We have seen in the region how citizens can organize protests in the streets demanding better services in the area of public transportation, health, or education, such as being the case in Chile, for instance. Or they can even organize themselves to oust presidents, as it has been the case in Guatemala. Citizens are unsatisfied with how governments function and demand a democracy that really delivers. According to the Moderator study, satisfaction in democracy is in decline in the region for the fourth year. In 2016, we had 34% satisfaction in democracy, and in 2017, we had 30%. Only 3 countries in the region are satisfied with democracy above 50%. These are Uruguay, Nicaragua, and Ecuador. Satisfaction in democracy, where elections will take place this year, in particular Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil, satisfaction in democracy is below 20%. Another aspect to take into account is the lack of trust in public institutions, which affects legitimacy. This remains one of the main government's challenges to be addressed by the administrations across the region. This is mainly due to corruption scandals, but also to the inefficiency and effectiveness of public administrations, which have an institutional design that is not yet adapted to the citizens of the 21st century. Based also in a survey done by Espectador, the following aspects are essential for citizens to have trust in the government. They want to be treated equally. They want the authorities to deliver on their promises, and they want more accountability, which are aspects that are not perceived to be in place today in the region. Governments need to be closer to their citizens. Today, citizens are much more concerned with issues that affect directly their quality of life, such as the effective delivery of public services. Also, we have to take into account that the relationship between governments and citizens is changing. Citizens are no longer just satisfied with receiving and viewing information. They want to take part and participate in the development and implementation of public policies. They want to have a say on the public policies that will affect their lives. Also, we have a much more complex environment in the region today. This is going to be a year in which many millennials will participate in the elections. 4 out of 10 in Mexico, where voting is mandatory but not enforced. 36% of millennials in Brazil, where also the vote is mandatory for 18 to 70 years old. And we also have different actors that get involved directly or indirectly in politics, such as religious leaders, social leaders, media, and even criminal networks. As I said, the citizen role is changing, And this also is increasing the gap between citizens' expectations and the government's capacity to deliver quality public services. Now, let me address some of the trends that we have seen in the electorate lately. I think we have more pragmatic citizens today. Citizens that are more concerned about how governments can address their demands and expectations in a transparent and effective way, involving citizen participation. This electorate has become more pragmatic because they want a government that provides better public services, better education, and better transportation, and all these services that don't have a right or a left way of doing things. There is no right or left way of collecting the trash. There's only an effective way of collecting the trash. And that's what are the matters that citizens really care about. Also, they are no longer patient to the rhetorical speeches and promises. They want more concrete results. We can also see that there is a demand for change and for ultimate power in government, which strengthens democracy. We can also see that there is a kind of rejection of traditional parties, which leaves more opportunity for political outsiders and populists, either from the left or right. For instance, the case of Espectador in Mexico, which is leading the polls, or Jair Bolsonaro, a right-wing former army officer in Brazil, who is also very high in the polls today. The two-party politics is on its way out, which also leaves fragmented legislatures and which makes governments more difficult. We also see an outrage with corruption. Citizens are becoming more vigilant. They held their governments more accountable to their electoral promises and demands for more transparency and access to information. Finally, we can also see a lot of polarization in the issues that are taken in the elections. And this polarization sometimes can be also divided between urban young voters, which easily adapt to the new way of doing politics, versus rural, more conservative voters, which are more used to the traditional politics. To address these issues, governments will need to innovate, focus on implementation, build and strengthen new skills for civil servants to deal with policy complexity, targeting service delivery and collaborative governance, collaborate and involve citizens, proximity to the citizens, hear their opinions, and take them into account in the decision-making process. And also develop leaderships to lead this change. This leads us to the concept of open government, which is a new concept of public management to address citizens' demands and bring government closer to its citizens. It presents an opportunity to strengthen democracy and reform the public sector. Trends in governance today are moving from an industrial age to a digital age, where technological connectedness presents some challenges for governments. Governments will need to work and respond faster, collaborate better with citizens and external organizations, work across boundaries within governments and out, and use information more effectively across governments while protecting privacy, and provide information through open data, which is reusable, appropriate, and provided in a timely manner. These trends will lead to governments that are more open, from participation through public oversight towards civic engagement, government that is more collaborative towards a more collaborative governance and public-private policy partnerships in issues such as public service delivery, education, and health. A government that is more effective, from managing procedures to managing and improving service delivery with a client orientation. The impact of open government in the governance can be seen in the leadership, which will force leaders to bring about cultural change. Expertise, which will create a need for new types of expertise and skills, including technology, management of big data, managing of partners. partnerships with citizens, NGOs, the private sector, information management, and adapt to the new role of citizens, which today want service from government that is personal, as simple and convenient as possible, fair and equitable, and that keeps information private. Citizens that want service developed in partnerships with them and others, and citizens that trust in government is influenced by their day-to-day experience in obtaining benefits and services. The OEA's Democratic Charter, approved in 2001, already stated that transparency in government activities, probity, accountability of governments, and public administration, among others, are essential components of the exercise of democracy. To conclude, I would say that major challenges to democracy are related to the exercise of democracy. We need strong institutions, a vigorous press, and vigilant societies, independence of the branches of government, in particular of the judicial system, more focus on policies proposed by candidates, and finally, effective public management, which is essential to strengthen democracy in the region through the implementation of open government principles in the development, implementation, and evaluation of public policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Fernanda, for setting this stage with this regional, broad picture of what's at stake during this year on the elections. Let me just highlight some of the things you mentioned so we can hear then from specific cases, the case of Colombia and Mexico, how these trends and these concerns are actually materializing in this specific context. I think what you mentioned about corruption, it's going to be very interesting to hear from our speakers how that issue is shaping the elections during this year. You mentioned that citizens are very informed and are asking for more, but at the same time in the campaigns we're dealing with this fake news and how biased information is contributing to the polarization that you also mentioned. I think that's also an interesting topic to discuss. The role of millennials and young people in different expectations of democracy, and just this general change in what we expect from democracy, the literary part of the democracy and the efficacy that we expect from our institutions. I think it's also being discussed during these elections. So with this excellent background that Maria Fernanda gave us, I'd like to invite who wants to start. Fidel, maybe? Fidel, kind of give us the specific picture of the elections in Colombia.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. I just try to give you a broad idea of the context in which the Colombian election is moving. And nowadays, and this is, as you know, the first election that we had after this agreement with FARC that ended armed conflict of more than half a century. So I'll go through the basics, the dates and all that, and then I briefly portray the players, the candidates, and what they represent. I talk of a couple of players that are behind and that are shaping the issues, the issues, and basically saying that we are missing an opportunity here. So, well, first, the basics we have is, well, we had a congressional election on March 11, then in 2 weeks from now, on May 27, we will have the first round of presidential election. If no candidate gets more than 50% of the vote, as it seems that will happen, we'll go to a second round that will take place on June 17th. The new president will take off on August 7th this year, and he will be in office for 4 years, as now re-election is prohibited in Colombia. Okay, let's go with the players. I brought you one of the latest polls by Armando. This is the one I personally trust the most. It was taken from April 20 to the 24th. But basically all the polls, the respective ones, show basically the same tendencies. The last one will appear by the end of next week, as in Colombia it's probably to publish polls during the week before the election. So leading those polls is Mr. Iván Duque, the candidate of Centro Democrático, which is a party founded around the ideas of former President Álvaro Uribe. One would say that Duque is the representative of the extreme right in this election. He's a young, sound guy, 41 years old. One would say a technocrat. He has worked mostly for multilateral organizations, although he didn't have a prominent position there. He then occupied a couple of public posts in Colombia, but was not in high leadership role, until he met former President Uribe. He then was included in a list for Congress that Uribe himself led, and he was elected senator for the period that is ending now. And I must say that he did a quite an active legislation there for years, especially dealing with economic issues. But he's basically Uribe's man. That was how he became a senator, that was how he became a presidential candidate, and that was how he's likely to be the next president. And Centro Democrático was one of the main activists during the referendum for peace about 2 years ago, promoting the no to the agreement that finally won that referendum. So one would say that Duque is on the crest of the low popularity that the peace process has in Colombia. Second in the polls is Mr. Gustavo Petro, a leftist who used to be a guerrilla member back in the 70s, not from FARC, but from M19, that in the late 80s also signed a peace agreement and led to an assembly that wrote the current Colombian constitution. Mr. Petro was quite a good, successful senator a decade ago, opposing Mr. Uribe's government, and then he was elected mayor of Bogota, the capital, where he did very criticized administration, to say the least. I would say that he promised and probably wanted to make big changes, but he demonstrated no ability to administer the city or to make his ideas feasible. He's a superb speaker then, though, and he has a modern discourse around fighting inequality, which is big in Colombia, the transition towards renewable energies, going hard against privilege, and so he's loved by youngers, by those millennials Maria Fernanda was talking about. Also because somehow he has been able to portray as the anti-politician, the different, the outsider. Sounds familiar? So before going with the other candidates, it is important to highlight that these two candidates that are leading the race did a very intelligent move late last year. They organized consultas, sort of primaries, with other candidates that share similar ideas with them. So those primaries took place during the congressional election last March. Not only did they get important votes, more than 4 million in the case of Duque and nearly 3 million in the case of Petro, but they also had the spot on them during all these months, which moved the debate towards the extremes that they represent. And the most wounded candidate by this move was Mr. Sergio Fajardo, a mathematician who used to be for many years a professor at one of the main private universities in Colombia, Los Andes. And one day he went to his home city, Medellin, and started to walk the streets looking for support for his entering in politics. And that way, with no support from politicians or political parties, he won the election for mayor of Medellin and then the governorship of Antioquia, the state where Medellin is. now he's running for president also against traditional politics, against political parties and politicians, and with a big discourse against corruption, which is also big in the country, as you know, Latin America, and, well, proposing a revolution in education as his main goal. He was the perfect outsider and started strong in the polls actually 1 year ago, as it seemed that at this point, or at that point, it seems that it was possible that after the peace agreement, Colombia might change the focus and give predominance to other important issues, such as the fight against corruption. However, Fajardo has lost that place as the outsider to Mr. Petro, who is a much better politician. Fourth in the polls is Germán Vargas Lleras, who resigned as vice president to run. This is the grandson of a former president and had a long career in public service, being a Minister of the Interior and Minister of Housing during the current administration, a senator for many years and so on. In this election, he represents traditional politics. And it's quite interesting that although he doesn't get more than 10% in any poll and runs fourth, well, most politicians and even most of the media gives him great chance of entering the second round and if such being the next president of Colombia. And the political machinery doesn't show in the polls, they argue, and he has very large machinery at his service. His party, the party he founded, Cambio Radical Change, actually won the congressional election that way. Most of the candidates were strong local politicians who moved voters by their vote or promising contracts and favors. So, well, that's true, but with less than 10%, it would be rare that he is able to enter the second round. That would say a lot about how strong traditional politics is in Colombia, not the result of Vargas. And then fifth in the polls, far behind, is Humberto de la Calle, a prestigious lawyer who has also a long public service career. His last duty actually was to negotiate and sign the peace agreement with FARC as the head of the negotiating team. So he's running basically as the protector of the peace process in this election. Another strange situation here, a peace process that ended an armed conflict that lasted more than half a century, doesn't seem to get enough interest from Colombian voters. And that may be due to the players behind. As you may imagine, one of them is former President Álvaro Uribe, who, by the way, was the most voted Congress person last March. Uribe, as you may know, was elected in 2002, just after a failed process with FARC. So he came to power with a security mandate, and he certainly changed the balance of power in favor of the state in fighting against FARC. Colombians simply loved for him for that. So in the crest of that popularity at the time, he changed the constitution to run for re-election, which he easily won in 2006. And then he tried to change the rules, trying to get a third period, but the Constitutional Court didn't pass the law allowing him to run again. Also sounds well, it sounds similar to other places. So he needed a successor at that point, and he chose Juan Manuel Santos, the current president, who had been his defense minister. With his support, just as it is happening now with Duque, Santos went on to win the presidency. The problem was that he didn't follow Mr. Uribe's mandate. On the contrary, he dedicated to negotiate with FARC. So during these past 8 years, as you may imagine, there has been a permanent political war between Uribe and Santos, and that is present now in the current situation, in which we have a new player that nobody thought would be so relevant in Colombian election, and that player is Nicolás Maduro, president or dictator of Venezuela. Why he became so important, how Colombians ended debating as a key issue result in this election, if we could become Venezuela, well, Uribe needed him. The peace agreement, far from being perfect, represented any way that FARC was not anymore a key actor in the election, as it had been in every election before. Once they gave up their arms and became a political party, the crime that in all Colombia went down. Just to give you an idea, here's, oh, I'm sorry. Well, okay, I had brought some data on the attacks on FARC, how they came down. So without the threat of a powerful FARC, it was going to, it was not as clear what were Mr. Uribe and his part going to save Colombia off. And the example of Venezuela was perfect, a perfect new threat to add to the low popularity of the peace process. Colombians were and are witnessing how thousands of Venezuelans are entering the country, escaping from the dramatic economic, social, and human rights situation in the neighboring country as a consequence of the Bolivarian revolution. So the fear of communism is represented in all these people. Just two last words to conclude before we go deeper in how institutions are working in these elections during the time. We Colombians expected that after the peace agreement, this election was going to allow us to think in different important issues, like those that Maria Fernanda mentioned: corruption, education, social welfare, environment, development in rural areas after the peace agreement, that we could grasp this big opportunity of this peace process to change the country and to do what the conflict had impeded us to do for more than half a century. Many things still may happen in this election, but 2 weeks from that day, it seems that once again, Colombians will be deciding between the far right and the far left, and will be voting for fear again, and not for construction of a better country. And so that explains why I put through the presentation after peace, no peace, or little peace. I've put throughout this presentation, at least for this election, I'm afraid that we miss an opportunity of passing the page of the armed conflict to start debating how to build a more modern and equal society and how to develop the conditions that could take Colombia to the future, which was, by the way, the main goal of a peace process like the one that Santos signed with FARC. Politics didn't let us pass that page for now, at least. We'll see how this develops. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Fidel, for this very clear picture of what's being discussed and who's taking which side in the Colombian election. I think it's going to be also interesting to contrast with the Mexican experience. Some of the things you mentioned, how many candidates have tried to own this identity of a politician like most politicians. I think that's also something that many actors are trying to gain in the parties and outside the parties in Mexico, and trying to have that identity. And also what you mentioned at the end, like, are we deciding based on fear or on hope? And I think that's also relevant for the Mexican case. So to learn more about the elections in Mexico, I'll give the microphone to Armando Ríos Peter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for the invitation. Of course, thanks to the International House, Catherine Baker, Dean, and to all the students, all of you. I was taking a look to the recent poll I just got yesterday. I didn't put a slide, but how are the numbers right now in Mexico? And of course, as in every election, we have different kind of polls. We have the ones of Reforma, which is a very important diary there, an important newspaper. Reforma gives like 48% points to López Obrador. I don't believe that poll, but that is like 20 more points than the other challenger, Ricardo Anaya, and like 30 points above Jose Antonio Meade. Well, as I say, I don't believe that poll, but we must say that that's the kind of perception we have right now in Mexico, that López Obrador is the very front runner right now. The poll I have, I'm going to give it to you. No, I am not allowed to do, but I will. It's Andrés Manuel López Obrador has like 32 points. Ricardo Anaya and Jose Antonio Meade are tied. They have 24 points each, 9 points below López Obrador. Zavala has 1 point, and El Bronco has 1 point. 50% of people don't know right now who to vote for. It's the front runner has 9 points above the other two, so they are challenging for the switcher vote. And we have 15% of people who haven't decided their vote. And the information I have is that most of that 15% people wouldn't want to vote for López Obrador. They mostly would want to vote for the second runner. So we have an election running. There's a competition, a very strong competition, and that's why it's so important to be here and to try to understand what's happening in Mexico. I try to put this sentence here: building a strong future or wasting time again. That's what I think that's at stake right now in Mexico. The economy is doing better. Well, here's Ernesto Rapilla. He has a better understanding than me. We used to be colleagues at the university, so he's a pretty much better economist than I am. But the economy is doing better. We have numbers that could say so. And even so, people are really mad. Really. No? So, as I was hearing Fernanda, I understand what she's saying. People feel dissatisfied about democracy. They aren't feeling included. So, these all situations have to do with the current election. Why the economy is doing better? Well, exports have had their highest increase in the last 6 years. Net foreign investment had an 11% increase in 2017. Employment, I just took the data for February, had a groundbreaking increase. Tourism, Mexico, just 2017, became the 6th most visited place in the world. Tax revenues, the highest revenue collection, will be this 2018. So we would say that the economy has, as always, challenges, but we have good data regarding this. This is just an example for the household consumption in last March has its highest peak for March, 9.9. This is the households consumption. So people are buying more stuff, no? So we would say that the economy isn't doing really bad. Every time we have good numbers in economy, we will say, okay, the ruling party will have a good development in the election. Well, that's not the case, as I was telling you regarding the recent polls. Violence and insecurity have increased dramatically in the last decade. For instance, this is a whole data since the 1926 to 2008. You can see that the increase in death, violence has been really, really peaking. And of course, this is only data for 2008. This has been increasing also in the last sexennium, in the Peña Nieto's administration. 2017 had the highest peak in terms of murders. Just imagine 25,000 people were killed in Mexico just last year. So the data is amazing, it's terrible, no? Bigger than the ones that Afghanistan or Iraq, countries which are having war right now, have had. Syria is the only one that has more death rates. But Mexico is the second place in the whole world. And regarding corruption or impunity, there are, of course, these are, as Fernanda said, an important base for social anger. Very, very important. How is Mexico right now in the perception of in the corruption perception index? We have the 135th place in the whole world. That's corruption. We have a lot of cases. I mean, we have terrible cases in the whole country, in different states. So Mexico has a very bad situation regarding this index. Impunity. In Mexico, of every 100 crimes committed, only 6.5 to 6.4 are reported. Only 6.4 crimes are reported to the authority. And of these 100%, only 14 are solved. So it's only 0.9, not even 1 point. 0.9% is the probability for a case to be solved in Mexico, a crime. Someone who's murdered, someone who is stolen, someone who is kidnapped. Only 1%, let's say. This is the magnitude of impunity Mexico lives upon. So, of course, all this situation pretty stronger than a good economy. 93% of people, regarding the latest polls of social humor, I don't know if you see it that way in English, are feeling angry, they are mad, no? They are dissatisfied of how Mexico is working. I would say that the electoral system is rotten. The political parties, all of them face the same kind of problems. Here I have what I call the 6 letter C's, no? The problems are of our electoral system, a vicious cycle. I will explain it very fast. How corruption and how crime are enhanced and generated in Mexico. Well, corruption, which starts with the letter C, starts during campaigns. First word with letter C. Political campaigns, which need more and more and more money. Only of public monies we have 7,000 million pesos. Ernesto can tell us how much dollars there. It's a lot of money. Because I cannot translate it right now. So, where does corruption start? In campaigns. Why political parties need so much money? Because they need cash for votes. Second word with letter C. Money for buying water tanks, which are called tinacos in Mexico. Money for buying food, despensas, buying cemento, things that are given to the people. Who receives this cash for votes? Third word with letter C, the clienteles, political clienteles. People who live in different places, which have different kinds of colors. They are yellow, that's the color of the PRD in the city of Mexico. They are clienteles of the PRD, the left party, or the party that used to be the part of the left. But they are red in the state of Mexico, that's the color for the PRI, the Partido de Revolución Institucional. Or they are blue in Guanajuato, in el Bajío, no, that's the color for the Partido de Acción Nacional. Or now they are morenas, no, in in Delegación Cuauhtémoc. Campaigns, cash for votes, clienteles, different colors, same kind of action. Who puts the money? Who's been putting more and more and more money, not only the public money, but for fourth word with letter C, the compadres. No? I didn't find any other word with letter C, so compadres. The compadres, what they do, they say, oh, okay, my compadre is going to be the presidente municipal, he's going to become the mayor or something. Okay, I'm going to put some money on that. Compadres put the money. Why do they put the money? Because they want to get the contracts for public goods, or, and that's the sixth letter C, which is the most important one. They are the ones who have the contacts with the crime. Huachicoleros in Puebla, or probably the ones who generate the open poppies in Guerrero, my home state, or any kind of criminal action you want to understand. That's why these numbers have increased so much. This is a specific interesting investigation I did in Google. Took me like 4 minutes. This is the Tinaco Classic. Oh, these are water tanks, different colors. Partido Acción Nacional, Puebla, PRI en Estado de México, Partido de la Revolución Democrática in Coyoacán, or Morena in the state of Mexico. Same thing, same way, same kind of work. My proposal to you is that this is the problem we have right now regarding political parties. So, if when people are mad, elections have to do with continuity or change, and of course, if parties are rotten, then leaders' profiles matter a lot. I think that's an important thing to see regarding this election. We have 5 candidates, as I told you. I think people need to see academic background, experience, country awareness, solutions, honesty. But the next 50 days, the election is on the 1st of July, probably people will ignore this because people are mad. So this is, I think, an important thing to say. We need to understand that the system is not working well. That's why there's so much dissatisfaction with democracy. We need to make leaders to show what they mean in terms of their profiles, but how they are going to enhance change. And I will take the last words of Maria Fernanda. I think change is needed. It doesn't have to do with left or right. It doesn't have to do with a single specific party, if it's an old one or it's a new one. It has to do on the way the leaders see change. And I would say, those who think collective, not single. Those who build horizontal new arrangements with people, with society, not vertical ones. And those who think open, not closed, are the ones who can enhance change. So I would say that this is the main matter of this election for Mexico. Mexico needs evolution in terms of the political party system. Needs evolution in terms of how society gets involved. People need to feel part of the decision. People need to feel part of what's going on in Mexico and of course in all Latin America. So the way the leaders see change will be important. We right now have these polls I told you. I think that's what's being challenged right now. Those who see the society top down, how I'm doing? Good? Top down. Those who think they have all the solutions, but don't want to the society to be part. So I think in the next 50 days, and of course millennials will be part of this, those who address how to work with people, how to use technology, how to generate a new dimension, a new participation regarding society, and how to make collective decisions will be part of the election. So, the election is not decided right now. Someone said that este arroz ya se coció. I don't know how you translate in English. That was Andrés Manuel López Obrador. I don't think this election is decided. 15% of people are switchers right now. They haven't decided their vote. and the difference is only of 9% from the front runner to the other two guys. So I think this is an important moment. 50 days for Mexico to evolve, thinking about the future, or probably just wasting time again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and with that we conclude our first round of presentations. We have time for a couple of questions. And maybe I'd like to start with a question about the polls, because yeah, it's very interesting how our perception of polls has evolved after several elections, many elections, using them and being informed by them. So the question is, after the experience with polls in the US and Europe, should Latin America be more cautious in trusting them? So I'd like to hear your, I don't know if someone wants to take, or we make a round brief intervention from the three. Yeah, let's get that.
Well, I'll start as a representative of the media that uses polls and contracts polls. And I think we need to be more critical of how they are done. And I think that they need to think if they are measuring rightly what is happening in society. Because I think, well, statistics is statistics, but it depends on how are you measuring, how are you asking the questions and where are you asking the questions. And I think that society has changed a lot, as Moderator mentioned, and probably the statistic is the same, and they are doing the same polls with the same, measuring things exactly as they did before. But anyway, I think that polls may have their problems, but again, statistics is statistics, and that's something that well done gives an idea. Of course, they have been wrong here. They were wrong in Colombia in the referendum. We all thought that the yes will win, and they don't won. But actually, the differences are not that big. So we need to be cautious of what the polls say, with what the polls say, but we have to accept that this is an instrument that we cannot just throw to the garbage.
Yeah, I agree completely that we have to be very cautious with polls, but lately we have had lots of surprises in Latin American elections, and I think we have to be careful about the polls. There are a lot of hidden votes in the region, either because of fear, as you said, or as you were saying, in Mexico there's 15%, which is a considerable margin that you have to consider, and you don't know where it's going to go. And we have had this case already this year in the case of Costa Rica. The leading candidate in the polls, a candidate which was at the bottom of the polls with members less than 10%, turned out to be the first voted candidate in the first round, which was Fabricio Alvarado. So I think there is a lot, you have to take the polls very carefully, and the sources of the polls also are really misguiding.
Yes, I will take what Janeth was saying. Probably Mexican election has to do in between fear, not hope, but probably anger. So I think that's the kind of relationship we have right now. Polls, of course, are part of the strategy. That's why they're so important. They generate perceptions. So right now, probably López Obrador is trying to generate this condition of this is done, this election is already finished, we're going to win, the third one is the best one, so we're going to win. And that's what his team and he is trying to do. We still have 50 days ahead. So what Ricardo Anaya is trying to say is the only one who can beat López Obrador is me. And that's why they generate this poll condition. So there's this difference between Jose Antonio Meade and López Obrador. So they generate a specific condition of the numbers. And you can do that if you put more indecisos, you put or less people. So you can play with the numbers, and that's well, I don't like that, but that's part of the strategy. That's part of the war, of the electoral war. So probably Ricardo Anaya is trying to pay the specific polls to say, I am closer to López Obrador, so all the switchers who don't want López Obrador to win should support me. And of course, there's another strategy in the other side. For instance, the people from the PRI saying, we would rather support López Obrador than support Ricardo Anaya. So all the businessmen, the important businessmen saying, how come? No? Yes, of course, we won't support Ricardo Anaya. We would rather support Morena. So then the businessmen, the most important ones who have been fighting with López Obrador these 2 weeks saying, then let's support the PRI. So that's the situation right now. But I think it's, of course, I don't believe much in polls. No? Every time you will say, who's paying for the poll, right? But we must feed them and try to understand what's underneath and what's beside them. What is the kind of strategy each poll is trying to sell? So I think, of course, we will see a lot of polls, 50 days ahead. But the election is not decided yet.
Thank you. And maybe just another question, like very quick answers. Regarding the second round, and in a context in which there is no, I mean, a lot of vote is decided on the basis of who I don't want to be president. What is the effect in Colombia of having a second round, and how is playing in this election? And what's the what would be the effect of not having it, or proposing discussing it in the future?
Well, in a polarized debate, it seems that this system of first and second round doesn't work much. But I think that it is very important, and we have had, for example, in election in Bogota for mayor, we have that has no second round. We have had elected mayors with 30% of the vote or something like that. And we know that if had it been a second round, they won't want. They have, I mean, all the other people have made candidates. So I prefer the second round system. I think that it allows people to vote in the first round more consciously. But yeah, when it gets so polarized, it seems that all the votes go for against one candidate and not because of the idea that you prefer.
Well, I think in Mexico we don't have a second round. We should have one, but we have an implicit second round. We've had it last elections. I think we'll have it again, and that's why it's so important that 15% of people haven't decided yet. Probably we can still see how some of the numbers move. Probably López Obrador has a specific, I don't know how you say it, but voto blando. Probably this 34% can go down. But the 15% is very important. And when you see the numbers regarding this 15% of people who haven't decided, the switcher ones, most of them would vote for the second place. The one who is in the second place in the previous week to the election would vote for the second place. That's what the numbers say. So that's what this is going to be a very tight election. And that's why I think López Obrador will lose again.
Just a word about the second round in general. I think it's important in general because otherwise with the emergence of so many movements and political parties, if you don't have the second round and you just choose what was the most voted, the legitimacy of the vote probably will be very low. With the second round, at least you have more legitimacy to govern.
Yeah, what you mentioned first about divided governments, which are now more and more the norm and not the exception. So I think we have more time. I thought, yeah, okay, well, we can go for another question. Is there a general trend in the region regarding how minority issues, regarding gender, indigenous groups, sexual minorities, etc., are addressed? Is that an issue that is emerging in the campaigns in Latin America?
If you allow.
Yeah, we can go the other way.
And I'll take this one for it's very important. It's going to be the first year where we don't have a woman candidate. After many years in the region, we won't have a woman president, and I think that's important to consider. But however, I think the case of minorities is being more and more important because candidates are realizing that they need to be more inclusive. It's important in practical ways probably because you need that kind of electoral and to be represented somehow. But the address of inclusiveness is becoming more and more important also in the way to govern because citizens are demanding more participation. And there are different kinds of demands. So in order to have those kind of perspectives, you need to include these minorities from the beginning when you are developing the public policies and implementing as well.
Well, in the case of Mexico, I think that the minority issues are not the first place we should put them. For instance, there's no left in this election. I used to be a member of the PRD for 10 years, but right now there's no left represented. Morena is some kind of a big popular coalition, but since it has a coalition with a Christian party, no? So all the agenda regarding lesbico-gay communities is not in place. It's not also in place because the PRD made a coalition with the Partido Acción Nacional, so they used to be left and right, and now since they are intertwined, the whole agenda is like not very clear. And the PRI, well, it hasn't had this as the main issues. I'm trying to help them with that. I made a coalition with the PRI. So, but these issues are not the main concern. For instance, migrants should be a very important issue. We have 12 million people living here. Only here in Chicago area, it's more than 1 million people. No? So migrants are important since our communities are pretty much more closer. But right now, I think this left and right is very, very unclear in the Mexican election. So we should be like pushing the minority issues.
I would say that in Colombia it's increasingly important gender and minorities in general issues, and well, not always in a good way. Particularly, for example, during the referendum, one of the fake news that was very strong in the vote was that the disagreement had a gender orientation and that Colombians will be obliged to be homosexual, to learn how to be homosexual in schools and things like that. And it was very effective against the referendum, for example. Or there was another candidate who resigned last week that was promoting a referendum to prohibit adoption by homosexuals and things like that. But I think in Colombia there have been great gains in all this, in the legislature and all that, and now there is also a comeback. So this is an important electoral issue, I would say.
And I'm just going to make a comment because I have the microphone. Because it's interesting how at the federal level, I mean, as Armando said, the PAN and the right and the left made a coalition, and they split candidacies. So the right has the presidential candidacy, and the left has the candidacy for mayor in Mexico City, which is also having elections this year. And so at the federal level, there's no left, and nobody took that agenda. Nobody reclaimed that agenda. And in the city, there is no right. And the candidate of PRI actually went to take the agenda against the LGBT community to try to attract the far-right electorate. So it's actually now like saying that it's going to bring to consultation again things as adoption from homosexual families and other issues that have been progressive a lot in the city, but now he's trying to go for that electorate. Since there is no candidate from the right that is appealing for a more traditional role model. So that's interesting and unfortunate, actually. And well, let me finish with a question. Like both of you mentioned, and you said maybe it's going to be a waste of time again. You mentioned maybe we can lose an opportunity after the peace. So after the election, like what's going to be left in the society, in our capacity, and as you mentioned, from the bottom-up perspective, what's going to be left for citizens to make sure or to contribute to that, so that doesn't happen? And how can we learn from other experiences in Latin American countries of new waves of participation or change that come from society after a contested election? And any final comment that you want to make, please. I mean, Fidel?
Well, that's not an easy question, but well, I would talk from what we see from the audiences, how in the paper, I mean how and what they consume, and I'm not that pessimistic. That I really feel that all these millennials or these young people are much more active than the generations before, and are more conscious of the, of how they could be more involved in politics to change things. So I won't be so pessimistic that all these people, this new generation, could make a change with their activism, with using how the information is being used today through the social nets and all that. So I think there would be pressure there that somehow could control this politics of fear and all that.
Well, in my opinion, I think, and I put it that way, it will be a waste of time, because the current Mexican election has to do on how we evolve the presidential figure. And that's why I think it has to do on something more horizontal and not something so much vertical. And that's my point of view. That's why the leader's profile is so important. We need right now for Mexico to evolve, for the millennials to have more participation, to have a much more open society where people and citizens get more involved in how they generate policies and how they evaluate them and all that. We need to have a figure that understands that this vertical action is not needed anymore. And that's, I think, the election we're running right now. Probably López Obrador, in my opinion, and Morena looks much more like the past figure of the three. Like having, again, an hegemonic popular party, no? And a leader in the very top part. Of course, he's been challenging the corruption, that's why he gets all this energy regarding that he means change. And that's why the election is so complex, because he has this figure of being challenging the system. But the problem is his own proposal generates again the system. So we need to have something more horizontal, more open, and that's why I think these 50 days are so important.
I think we are already seeing some of these kind of movements in the streets in Latin America. We see that more young people are much more active today. We have seen the students in Venezuela, now we see the students in Nicaragua. So I'm very hopeful that after the elections is when the biggest challenge are for the governments, because not only young people, but citizens in general are going to demand more, are going to be more accountable on the promises that the candidates make. They are going to hold them accountable. And today there are more ways of doing that, thanks probably to technology, but also this new way of thinking, more horizontal probably than political. You don't need to be part of a political party to make your voice heard today. So these kind of movements, I think, are already taking place, and they will continue and grow. So I'm very hopeful in that sense that more and more citizens will be more active participating, and hopefully not only in the streets, but on matters that, issues that really matter as well.
Well, thank you so much. I hope you will be following very closely what happens in Mexico, Colombia, and the rest of Latin American countries. Thank you for your participation and for your also for your questions.